Well, this past Thursday night, I had an incredible privilege. I got to speak at a fundraising dinner for communities and schools of Renton. And as at the event, the Lieutenant Governor, Brad Owen, spoke. And, I will tell you, I am sure there's a lot that I would not agree with him on. But one of the things that he has worked really hard on is the idea of mentoring and raising up mentors and really trying to help teenagers to get through that challenging time of life, especially teenagers that have, in many ways, have the deck stacked against them. He spoke, he did a great job. They had a mom spoke right before I got up. And she told the story of how her family began to be helped by the family liaison at their son's elementary school. As I was listening to this lady speak, the thought that came to me was, this lady's story is exactly why we as a church take our Vacation Bible School offering and give it to those, or to the Highlands Elementary School family liaison. This is a family that seriously, honestly, through no fault of their own, were in a place where they were becoming homeless. She had gotten sick. She has end-stage renal disease, not able to work. Before they had both her husband and she had been working full-time. They were doing great. Things were going well. Life was just flowing along like we all think it should. And then she became sick and couldn't work full-time. She had to go to part-time. They started cutting back. They had a little cushion. They started cutting back. Things were going okay. Well, then she became sicker and she couldn't work at all. And she ended up losing all of her health insurance, all of her insurance benefits. And now she has additional expenses that she has to cover and doesn't have the ability to cover those. And so they're trying to cut everything they can. She's cutting back on medicines that she really needs, taking all of these steps. And then, to top it all off, her husband loses his full-time job, is cut back to part-time. And here now a family that is ending up going into a homeless situation. It's not their fault. This is not a family that they were just bums and weren't willing to do what they needed to do to survive. This is a family through no fault of their own was placed in that situation. And the family liaison did things to help them out through that time, helping the family now kind of getting back on their feet. Mom is still very sick. They have a long way to go. The kids have done great. The son, has got 4.0 going into middle school. He's doing great. The daughter, who is in high school, is doing great. But it was really exciting to hear, here's a family that was headed for disaster. But it was the Communities in School. It was an organization that we support that helped them to get through that. And I just want to encourage us. I know we've encouraged you to give to that. Please continue to give. Let's raise that money up. The funds there, the money that we give for family liaison Highlands Elementary to use, it is used well. It's used very smartly. And it's a great opportunity for us to just continue to make an impact in our community. If you got a Bible, I ask you to open the book of Galatians. And I think in just a minute there's going to be a picture come up here. This is a picture, this is the man that was the pastor of the church that I grew up under. And now I'm going to tell you the story, but don't worry, I am not leaving, okay? Alright, let me just get that right out of the front. Because as Brad saw my sermon outline, he goes, man, you better be careful with this one. When I became a pastor, one of the questions, one of the things that was always kind of in the back of my mind is at some point I would have to face the issue of if I would try to follow him as a pastor at First Baptist Sanger. And it was, there was a part of me that kind of wanted to do that, but there was another part of me that said, oh no, I did not want to do that. Well, this past year, that question really became a reality because Brother Skip gave his resignation, he retired, and then the church, now they were going through that process of looking for a new pastor, and of course, as soon as Brother Skip retires, I got a couple of phone calls. One of those phone calls was my mom, the other phone call was my dad, and then my sister called not long after that. And each one of them had a question. Are you going to apply? Are you sending a resume? You need to send a resume. You need to send it. I had a couple of friends that were giving me a hard time. One of my friends was just joking with me. Yeah, you need to send a resume. They kept after me. I prayed about it for about 2 seconds. I was very spiritual, yes. I prayed about 2 seconds and decided, no way. I do not want to go back to Sanger, Texas. There's a lot of reasons as to why I didn't want to go back to Sanger, Texas. One of those reasons is that a lot of the people that are at that church, they were the people, they were the ones, they changed my diapers when I was in the nursery. They taught me through elementary school and Sunday school, and probably some of them taught me in public school also. They taught me through middle school, and believe me, any of them that taught me through middle school, they would have a hard time looking at me as their pastor. Well, all these people, they knew me. And I was kind of worried a little bit about going back and leading a church with all those people that knew me. And that was an important reason. Another reason I really didn't want to go back was it gets hot in the summertime in Texas. And Josh is going to be experiencing some more of that. It's good to have you back today, Josh. I wish we could have you back for a lot more than today, but it's good to have you today. It gets hot. I didn't want to go back for that. All those reasons are important. Those reasons are great. But that's not the most important reason why I never sent a resume. The most important reason that I never sent a resume is very simply God had not called me. God called me here to be the pastor, not in Sanger, Texas. As much as I want to go back to Texas at times, I know that the only wise choice is to follow God first in my life. Is to make sure that I put Him in first place and am faithful and obedient to what He calls. Following God first and foremost is challenging. It requires taking stock of our life, of our past, our present, and our future. Every one of us needs to do just that in life. What made me kind of go back and look at my past, my present, and my future was the very simple fact that that man retired. It kind of put me in that place where I had to look back and I had to go, okay, what am I going to do? Where am I going? And what's going to be the path of the future of my life? His retiring made me sit down and take stock. The Apostle Paul examined his life. And he outlined that process for us in the book of Galatians. Again, I want you to open to Galatians chapter 1. We'll start reading in verse 16. Actually, I'm going to pick up in verse 15 because we really kind of pick up in the middle of a sentence. But I want us to think about Paul's looking back at his life and in the way he's taking stock of his life. And we're going to hit some other things, but that's what I really want us to focus on. Galatians chapter 1, I'll start at verse 15. But when God, who from my mother's womb set me apart and called me by His grace, was pleased to reveal His Son in me, so that I could preach Him among the Gentiles, I did not immediately consult with anyone. I did not go up to Jerusalem to those who had become apostles before me. Instead, I went to Arabia and came back to Damascus. Then after 3 years, I did go up to Jerusalem to get to know Cephas, and I stayed with him 15 days. But I didn't see any of the other apostles except James, the Lord's brother. Now, in what I write to you, I'm not lying. God is my witness. Afterwards, I went to the regions of Syria and Cilicia. I remained personally unknown to the Judean churches in Christ. They simply kept hearing, "He who formerly persecuted us now preaches the faith he once tried to destroy." And they glorified God because of me. In this passage, Paul is defending his authority as an apostle against a group of men that we call Judaizers, or the men of James. You'll hear them called different things, but typically it's the Judaizers or the men of James. This group tried to discredit Paul by claiming that he received his authority from the apostles in Jerusalem. Now, why is that important? Because what they would say is, well, Paul is only an apostle because he was given that authority by the apostles there in Jerusalem. And so he derives all of his authority from those apostles. Well, then they would turn right around and say, but here's the problem. Paul's not been to Jerusalem in a while. He's not gotten the latest information, the latest knowledge from the apostles in Jerusalem. We just came from Jerusalem. And so if they could get the people in Galatia to believe that Paul derived his authority for teaching from the apostles in Jerusalem, well, they'd be able to discredit everything that he says. And so I could take a whole sermon, I could preach about that. It's an important topic, but I'm not going to do that today. What I want us to do, I want us to take another look as we examine this passage. I want us to look at Paul's post-conversion life as an example of how we can either get started right in Christ, or how we can kind of take stock of our life and take those next steps. How we can look at where we are and then begin to go forward from there. In verses 16 and 17, Paul says the first thing he did when he became a follower of Christ, when he had that conversion experience, that he got alone with God. If you look at verse 16, it says that I did not consult with anyone. You may have a translation that says, I did not consult with flesh and blood. That word consult, it means to confer, but it really carries the idea of look to for advice and consent. For consent. That's the important thing, I think, here. Paul says that I did not go to anyone, and the term flesh and blood, it is the common terminology for humans, for mortals. Paul says, I did not go to anyone for consent. When I became a follower of Christ, I did not go sit down with anybody and say to them, I am now a follower of Jesus, may I preach? He didn't get permission from anyone. Instead, what Paul did is he went to Arabia. Arabia is a region that is sometimes called the Kingdom of Nabatea, or the Nabatean Kingdom. It includes the city of Petra. And if you have not ever seen pictures of the city of Petra, I encourage you to go home, get on the computer, Google Petra. And if it's the long-haired Christian rock band that comes up, it's not them, okay? They took their name from the city of Petra. But if you see pictures of the city of Petra, it is an amazingly beautiful city, just carved out of rock. Incredible city, but it is a very lonely, it's a very isolated and desolate place. It's a great place to get along with God. Paul left Damascus when he had his experience on the road to Damascus. And then he goes in and on to Damascus, and he is met by, I just forgot the name of the guy that met him there. Simon? Simon, thank you. He met Simon. Simon, talks with him a little bit. Very soon after that, Paul leaves the city of Damascus. And he goes and he gets alone with God. This time alone with God for Paul was a time of trying to comprehend exactly what was happening in his life. It was a time for Paul to really kind of take stock and say, okay, where am I at? God, what's going on here? Now, some people say, well, Paul preached in that area some. He may have, but I really think that it's doubtful that Paul did any preaching at this time. I think what he did was he got away doing anything else. Paul got alone.